I'm receiving a lot of questions about binaural rendering of Dolby Atmos, and I haven't done a video on binaural rendering for a while, so I felt it is time to correct it. So what I'm going to show you today is how to binaurally render Dolby Atmos in Cubase with head tracking. How cool is that? So let's get started. But first of all, hello everybody. In case you're new here, my name is Michael Wagner. I teach at the Antoinette Westphal College of Media Arts and Design at Drexel University in Philadelphia. And on this channel, I talk about digital media, game design, and spatial audio. And if any of those topics interest you, I invite you to subscribe or join my Discord community. An invite link is in the description below, and it is completely free. The original motivation for this video came from a sale that happened not that long ago on the Plugin Alliance site. They had the Embody Immerse Virtual Studio, the Ellen Meyerson edition on sale. And in case you don't know, Embody Immerse is a system that allows you to monitor spatialized audio in a binaural way by using a personalized head-related transfer function, or HRTF. This way this works is that you scan your ear, you send it off to the internet, and then you get your transfer function back that they can use in these plugins. And the results are pretty good. I did a video a while back on the version of Embody Immerse that is natively included in the MB decoder that comes with Nuendo or also Cubase. Back then, my main grievance with the system was the price tag, really. I felt it to be very expensive for what it was. But with the sale, actually, I thought I'll give it another try, and I'm glad I did because it actually works pretty well, and it is actually not that expensive. So what we're going to do today is we're going to use the Embody Immerse Virtual Studio, the Ellen Meyerson edition, for binaural rendering, and we're going to add head tracking to that. But before I do that, I should probably mention what exactly binaural audio is or what exactly binaural rendering is, because that is usually relatively poorly understood. Essentially, what you're trying to do in binaural audio is you're trying to recreate the way the auditory system works. So instead of having sound come out of two speakers, the idea is that you have sound coming out of the headphones. And if you do that from the headphones, the problem that you usually run into is that the sound is not natural. And the reason for that is because when you use headphones, sound is pumped directly into your ears. Whereas if you're listening to speakers, there's all kinds of things going on before sound actually enters your ears. The shape of your ears make a difference. The size of your head makes a difference. Where your ears are located exactly makes a difference. And all these things influence the way you actually experience sound. And if you're putting headphones on your head, that all is lost. So what you're doing in binaural audio is you're essentially trying to bake that effect into the audio so that when you use headphones, it sounds as close to real life as possible. Now, there are two caveats that we need to talk about, and the first one is that if you're using binaural audio, obviously it only sounds good with headphones. If you're listening to binaural audio through speakers, it essentially doubles the effect of the binaural, the head-related transfer function, because essentially you have the head-related transfer function that is baked into the binaural audio, and in addition to that, you are doing the same thing with your ears. So it's really kind of not sounding good if you're listening to binaural audio through speakers, so you have to listen it through headphones. And the second issue is that binaural audio is immensely personalized, because especially if you're using a personalized head-related transfer function, the audio that you're getting is only sounding good to you, the owner of that particular set of ears that created that particular head-related transfer function, and anybody else might not see or might not feel that that sound is actually sounding that particularly good. So what people usually do when we are talking about binaural audio, they're using a standardized head-related transfer function that sounds reasonably good for everybody. It's not perfect for anybody, but it sounds good for everybody. And most of the systems that we deal with allow us to use some sort of a standardized head-related transfer function. Most importantly, Dolby Atmos has one that is actually pretty good, but there are a couple of other systems as well. Now, obviously, if we want to monitor audio as best as possible, we would like to have a personalized head-related transfer function. And this is where Embody Immerse comes in. Embody Immerse allows you to essentially use a personalized system, and the binaural audio that you're getting is completely optimized for your ears, or at least that's the idea. But enough said. The way I'm going to start today is by continuing a project that I created for demonstrating how to set up Dolby Atmos in Cubase 12. It is essentially a collection of loops that come with the Elastic player that is essentially from Überschall. I'm going to leave a link to that video in the description below. In case you want to recreate it, you can actually recreate the exact loop. Now, I've already installed the RGLab head tracker. That is the head tracker that I'm going to use today. I have not yet set up everything in Cubase, so everything that we're going to hear in Cubase for now is essentially without head tracking. But we're going to add head tracking a little later in this video. So let's just have a brief listen on how that loop sounds. And essentially it is exactly the same loop that I used in the Dolby Atmos video. The only thing that I did is I changed the gains a little so that it makes a little bit more of a consistent impression. That's really everything that I did. And let's just have a look on the different things that we have, in particular kind of the Dolby Atmos setup. Now, if we go on into the Dolby Atmos bus, the Dolby Atmos bus holds the Dolby Atmos renderer. And once again, if you are not familiar with that, please go back and watch the video on how to set up Dolby Atmos in Cubase 12. But essentially, you need a 7.1.4 bus that holds the Dolby Atmos render, and the Dolby Atmos render will then be responsible for creating the Dolby Atmos file. And if we open up the Dolby Atmos renderer, we see essentially that we have a 10-channel Dolby Atmos bed that is a 10.1.2 track, and that essentially holds all the kick, the snare, the hi-hats, and the pads. That's really everything that we piped into the Dolby Atmos bed. And then we have a couple of objects. These are original stereo tracks. They translate 3 stereo tracks that translate into 6 objects, and they are essentially at the base the keys and the synths. So that essentially completes the Dolby Atmos file, and we see sort of the position of these objects. Let me just move that over here a little. We see the position of these objects here in the object view of the Dolby Atmos renderer, and also the activity. And the way I've set it up, and this was actually on purpose, is such that all channels, all 12 channels actually have action on them. So there are things happening on all 12 speakers. Now, the way I'm currently listening to that is through a 7.1.4 down mix, and that down mix is then further down mixed to a stereo track that I hear, or a stereo signal that I hear on my headphones. And the first thing that people were very excited about was that in the Cubase version of the Dolby Atmos renderer, and also in the Nuendo 12 version actually, Steinberg started to include the binaural rendering option. So what we can do is, instead of using the 7.1.4 and then downmixing into stereo, we can use the binaural renderer. Now, why would I like to do that? Once again, I would like to do that primarily because the impression that I'm going to get through a binaural rendering is going to be much more accurate than the simple downmix from 7.1.4 to a stereo file. Once again, the reason being that in a binaural rendering, you're trying to recreate the impression that you're getting when when sound essentially enters your ears. Now, as I said before, this is a normalized or standardized head-related transfer function that Dolby is using, but it is a really good one. So for most people, they actually like it, and it seems to be fairly accurate. So let's just have a brief listen on how that sounds with binaural rendering enabled. So once again, we have this is the original 7.1.4 downmixed to stereo. And let's switch to binaural. So let's maybe switch back to 7.1.4 so that we hear the difference. Once again, binaural. Now, in order to get the full impression, you need to listen to this video on headphones. If you do that through stereo speakers, you might not really kind of hear exactly what I'm hearing here today, because once again, binaural audio is meant to be heard with headphones. But you can hear that sort of the binaural rendering is a little bit more lively. It works better, and it is sort of really preferred for monitoring purposes, because it gives you a more accurate representation of what you would actually hear in a Dolby Atmos room. The problem with using the binaural renderer that comes with Dolby Atmos is the fact that this is with respect to a fixed head position. So essentially I cannot, if I change my head, I am not really getting the correct impression anymore. So if you think about if you're sitting in a Dolby Atmos room and you have all the speakers around you, as soon as you move your head, you will get a different impression of your sound. And this is usually done by implementing some sort of head tracking. And with the Dolby Atmos renderer, if I'm using the binaural option, I can't really do that because essentially it assumes a fixed head position. So what I need to do is I need to actually use an external binaural renderer in order to kind of get around that. So the first thing that we're going to do is, instead of using the Dolby Atmos renderer, we're going to use the Embody Immerse virtual studio as a replacement for binaural rendering. So let's go into the settings of our Dolby Atmos bus. And the first thing I need to make sure is that I essentially just have the 7.1.4 enabled, because I don't want to use the binaural renderer that comes with the Dolby Atmos renderer. Instead, what I would like to do is I would like to use the Embody Immerse Virtual Studio. And the easiest way to do that is Embody Immerse, actually, the Virtual Studio advertises itself as a panning function, a panner. So what I can do is I can simply replace the panner from the standard down mix or mix control panner to the, okay, so here we are, change the panner to the Immerse Virtual Studio Allison Meyerson panner. And as soon as I do that, it will actually pop up. For some reason, it always opens up with the Audis LCDX. Now, be aware that the impression that you will get might not really kind of sound particularly good, because the Immerse Virtual Studio is optimized for particular headphones. In my particular case, what I'm going to use is I'm going to use the headphones that I'm currently having, which are the Biodynamic DT1990 Pro. And I'm also going to make sure that I'm going to remove as much of the headphone EQ as possible, so that you don't, because you will essentially hear that it's not going to sound particularly good. So I'm going to remove that just for the purpose of this video, and that is essentially everything I need to do in order to get that set up. So let's have a listen on how that sounds with the Ellen Meyerson Virtual Studio. Now you can play around with the ambience in the room and essentially kind of do it in a way that works for your particular setup. Once again, currently it sounds maybe a little bit on the bassy side, primarily because the DT1990 are headphones that are very bright. So it's trying to correct it. Even if I put the headphone EQ to minimum, it still corrects it to some extent. So you need to work with the type of headphones that you're having and kind of just try out a couple of things. But it does work pretty well. Now, this is the first thing that we did. So we have the Immerse Virtual Studio enabled, and we're now using the binaural rendering that comes with the Embody Immerse. So the second thing I want to do is I want to do head tracking in between. So instead of using my fixed head position, I would like to be able to move that around. Now, I can't really do that directly in Cubase, or I should probably kind of clarify that we have not yet found, or I have not yet found a way to actually do that. In theory, Cubase has a head tracking function that allows you to use an external head tracker. So at least it's kind of explained that way. However, it is not documented at all, and I have not yet found anybody who was able to actually use that with an external head tracker such as the RJ Labs head tracker. So we can't really use Cubase for that purpose. So what we're going to do instead is we are going to use the IEM plugin suite. Now, the process that we're going to use is actually relatively straightforward. Instead of changing the head position, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to change the room position. So I'm going to use a plugin in the IEM plugin suite that actually translates or changes the orientation of the room. And that will have the same effect as if I would change my head position. So think of it, if I'm moving my head to the left, essentially it's pretty much the same thing as if I would be moving the entire room to the right. So we are going to kind of use this little trick that we, instead of rotating the head, we're actually rotating the room. Now, in order to be able to do that, I need to first convert the the audio into Ambisonics audio because these room rotating plugins primarily work on Ambisonics. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to include or add an additional channel that converts the 7.1.4 into Ambisonics, and then we are going to do the room rotation in that Ambisonics on that Ambisonics group track, and then we're going to convert it back into 7.1.4 and then rendering binaural with the Alan Myerson Immersive Studio. So let's add an Ambisonics track, and before I do that, I should probably kind of switch the panner back to the original panner just to make sure that Cubase is not confused or anything. So let's just switch that back to the mix convert panner, and let's just double check if everything still sounds okay. And yes, it does. So let's add an Ambisonics track. And once again, this Ambisonics track is just going to be a helper track, really. So we're going to add a third order Ambisonics. It's going to be routed into stereo out, and let's call it Ambisonics. And let's add the track. And then let's reroute the Atmos bus into the Ambisonics track, converting the 7.1.4 into a third order Ambisonics. Into a third order Ambisonics file or a third order Ambisonics format. And let's just check if everything still sounds okay. And yes, it still does. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add an additional track that will convert the Ambisonics, because we're going to only use the Ambisonics in order to rotate the room. So let's add an additional track that will convert that Ambisonics file once it has been rotated back into 7.1.4 so that we can use the Alan Myerson Virtual Studio. So let's add one more track here, and going to do, and in this case I'm going to use a 7.1.4 track, and let's call that binaural rendering. So let's add that, and let's make sure that everything is routed correctly. Now, if you remember in my previous video, I said that I'm not particularly happy with the way Cubase, or also Nuendo for that matter, translates Ambisonics into 7.1.4. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to disable the native panner or the native decoder, the MB decoder, and instead use the IEM decoder. But let's first make sure that all the routing is correct. So we have the Atmos bus is routed into the Ambisonics bus. The Ambisonics bus then needs to be routed into the 7.1.4 that's going to hold the binaural renderer. So let's do that. Now, as soon as I do that, it will actually come up with the MB decoder, and I don't really like that MB decoder. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to disable the MB decoder, and the way to do that is, unfortunately, that's a little bit. It seems to be a bug in the system, really, because you can't disable it directly. You need to first change it to the standard panner. And then once you have it at the standard panner, you can disable it. And now I need a separate decoder, because I now currently am not decoding the Ambisonic signal. So the Ambisonic signal is coming into the 7.1.4, and it's obviously not translating into that particularly well. So I need to first kind of add a decoder, an MB decoder. And the way I'm going to do that is by using the IEM simple decoder. This is essentially the same thing that I did in one of the, I think it was the last video where we were talking about the simple decoder and how to essentially use it for converting Ambisonics into 7.1.4 or 7.1.2 format. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply select the 7.1.4 settings. This will decode them into the correct channel order, and I'm going to use the max RE weights because those, at least for me, sounded best. And let's just double check if everything now sounds correctly. And that seems to be okay. Now, obviously, kind of the gain needs to be adjusted now, but for the moment being, that is perfectly fine. So what we now want to do is we want to take the Ambisonic signal and want to rotate that with a plugin that comes with the IEM plugin suite, and this rotation should be connected to my head movements. So when I move my head to the left, the room should be rotated to the right, and so forth. And you can do that essentially with almost any external head tracking system. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use the Archilab head tracker. And the reason I'm going to do that is because it already has a preset, or the software that comes with it already has a preset that actually kind of does everything for us. So we don't really need to do much. We just need to use that particular preset. So let's go back into the Ambisonics channel. And here is essentially where the magic is going to happen. So what I want to do is, and let me first of all move that simple decoder down so that I have an insert slot here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the IEM scene rotator. And what the IEM scene rotator does is it rotates the room. So it rotates the entire audio file. And I can actually use that in order to mimic the effect that I'm getting when I'm rotating my head. Now, obviously, I need to rotate the room, and I've already said that a couple of times, I need to rotate the room in the opposite direction that I'm rotating my head. Now, the scene rotator actually has a couple of flip functions. So if you use a regular head tracker, you can actually use this flipping function in order to flip the rotation or to flip the direction. What we are going to do is we're going to use a function that actually comes with the Archilab's head tracker. So we don't really need to do anything here. We just need to connect the Archilab head tracker with this particular scene rotator plugin. Now, the way to connect the head tracker with the scene rotator plugin is by using a head tracking bridge. So let's start the OSC bridge that comes with the Archilab's head tracker. It's called the head tracker OSC bridge, and it actually is to be correct, the Ambisonic head tracker OSC bridge. That's essentially the full title. And what we need to do is we need to first of all connect. Now, in my particular case, I think it is COM4. So let's just connect, and yeah. So I've connected. So when I'm moving my head, essentially I see this little head here rotating. Let me just kind of reset that to 0. And okay, so everything is working okay. And the next thing I need to do is I need to remember that port, because we're going to need to use it later. So that is 4040. It doesn't really make any difference. You can change that to any number you want, but in my case, it's set up to 4040, so that's fine. And then as a preset, let's use the IEM scene rotator, and that is already set up in a way that it provides inverse information. So you don't no longer have to actually do the inversion at the plugin level. The inversion is actually done at the bridge level, and the information that comes from the head tracker is already communicated correctly into the scene rotator, so that the scene rotator is actually doing exactly what you want it to do, moving the scene essentially into the opposite direction than your head is moving. So let's select that. And the next thing I need to do is I need to go into the scene rotator itself. So here we are on the Ambisonics channel, and let's open up the OSC settings. Now, what you need to do is you need to essentially establish the connection to the OSC connection to the bridge. And so we click on OSC, and I do apologize because of the way I'm using scaling on Windows. This is terribly small, but all we really need to do is there is a little tab here that's called the OSC receiver, and it says listen to port. So everything we need to do is we just need to put the port number in there, and that was 4040. You remember that. And let's open that port, and as soon as I have that port opened, I see essentially that the information is communicated. And as you can see, it is already communicated correctly. So if I'm moving the head to the left, the scene is actually rotating to the right. So if I'm moving my head to the left, you see the blue thing here is moving to the left, and the other way around. If I'm moving up, it's going down. If I'm moving down, it's going up. So I now have the scene rotator connected to my head tracker so that it mimics what is happening when I'm moving my head around. So the last thing I really need to do is I need to put the binaural renderer on the track, and then I'm essentially done. So let's do that. So once again, what is really happening here is, and let's just click that away here. What is really happening here is that the Atmos bus creates a 7.1.4. That 7.1.4 is converted into Ambisonics. It is then rotated within Ambisonics, and then with the IEM decoder decoded back into 7.1.4. And the only thing we now really need to do is we need to change the panner, or we need to change the essentially, yeah, the penner from the mix convert penner to the immersive virtual studio Alan Meyerson, and that will essentially add the binaural rendering to the file. So let's just do that. So let's add that. And once again, I've now added that. It once again starts up with LCDX. I don't want that. I have a biodynamic DT990 Pro, but that's fine. And same thing, I'm going to just turn down the headphone EQ amount and maybe change the ambience a little. It sounds a bit better if the ambience is higher. Let's move that up to 50%. And then let's see what happens. The last thing I probably should do is just to make sure, let's just reset the direction. So that when I'm looking straight ahead, it is as close to 0 as possible. And then let's play the sound and what we can hear. So if I'm now moving the head, the scene is actually rotated in opposite direction. That essentially means that I should get the correct compression. So if I'm moving to the left, I have the kick essentially in front of me and the keys in the back. And if I move in that direction, it's the same thing. If I'm moving up, if I'm moving down, same thing. So what we've now really done is we have added head tracking to a binaural rendering. This is something that you can do. Now, obviously, there are many different ways on how to actually do that. And this is just one way that uses the Allison Meyerson Immersive Virtual Studio with the IEM Scene Rotator. If you have any interest in these types of tutorials, let me know, and I can certainly do more of them. In essence, this is really everything I wanted to say today. Thank you so much for listening and watching my videos. If you have any questions or comments, please use the comment section below or join my Discord community. An invite link is in the description below. And with that being said, see you at the next video.